We have three amazing folks here today to share some thoughts on funding transformation. Because what we've been talking about, and we are talking about, is how are we going to get into the future? In order to get to the future, we have to do stuff. And that stuff also requires funding. And we try many things in order to get there. And so it's going to be very interesting to think about transformation and what we're doing. And so we have Christian, who's right next to me here. We have Christin. And then we have Felix. So you need to have do you have a C name anywhere at all? Like does your middle name have a C in it?
No.
No? All right, that's okay. So, Felix, no, I'm not going to make up one. I'm not going to do that. So, Felix, what does everybody in the room need to know about you in the context of our idea of transforming the capital to make that happen?
My name is Felix, father of two, come from Berlin. I jumped in short notice for Andreas Rickert, who couldn't be here. So it's my first time, love it already. I have a background in innovation management and entrepreneurship. And my current or my career path so far is very fragmented. But if there's one red line, it's transformation. I always found myself in situations in corporate, startup, consulting, social organizations, in situations of transformation. And transformation, I mean, it's a two-sided thing. It opens up for new ways of thinking. It also is somehow disruptive. But that's something I would like to discuss with you today.
All right, I gotta get back here, and we'll get back to that in just a minute. So, Christin, what is it? You have been with us more than once. It's the first time you're up here with us. So, what does everybody in the room need to know about you in the context of our conversation today?
I want to get 111 years old, and I will.
Now that's a statement.
I will and want to devote the rest of my life, like the last, I think, the majority of my career, to making the shift towards a regenerative and circular economy a reality with impact investments. I love the session of you, Natasha. Our company is called G. G means positive life energy, but also stands for conscious, holistic, and impactful investing. So I think also from an investment perspective, we need to think much more holistically and in a systemic way. And I'm super looking forward to the discussion that we're having now.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. And Christian, you're also a member of the 2040 community since many years. So great to have you up here.
First year 2021.
First year 2021.
I still need to get my badge,
your
my
dots.
dot. Yes.
Sorry, dude. That was yesterday. You missed the opportunity. Yes. You have to come back next year. All right. So, what does everybody in the room need to know about you in the context of this dialogue?
So, first of all, thank you so much. Good to be here again. Christian, I live in Switzerland for 15, 17 years. Actually, I don't count anymore. Originally from Germany, based in St. Gallen. Lived there with my partner, with my wife. Founding family. So what is more on the commercial side? So I've been working for 5 years in one of the top 10 VCs, venture capital firms that invest in startups, do direct and fund investments. So I have some background in this. So what does it mean actually to attach money to certain ideas and to scale them? Number one, there's some similarities with, of course, both of you. And then I did a hard pivot and started an impact fund that is basically doing reforestation, afforestation, and agriculture, small agriculture projects in Africa. And yeah, this was actually in the very first year of here being at Year 2040 as well.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about this idea of how do you understand this idea of helping transformation happen? So, Christian, you talk about impact investing. How do you look for things? How do you find them? What do you believe can actually work? Because many solutions are not just clever, but they're catalytic. And so, how do you see those? How do you find those? And what, yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, maybe if we jump right into the topic, I mean, for which companies do we look? We look for companies that, can you hear me well? Yeah, that have the impact.
We fight with the mechanical things in the air, but, you know, they can hear you.
That have the positive impact element really ingrained in the core DNA of the company. So basically in the core product or core business model, basically. So not only being like a byproduct or whatever, like a CSR layer, but really having, you know, that transformative business model. We invest in companies that have the potential to change the sectors they're operating in. We're really looking for companies, you know, also that have the potential to drive systemic change. How do we look for them? We have a very broad network in the European ecosystem. We actively, of course, scout for those companies. We are on conferences. We look for those companies like everywhere, in juries, wherever we are involved. But also through referrals, through our advisory board, even through our investors who also recommend potential portfolio companies to us. So it's a very, very active, engaging process also to find those companies.
Great. So Felix, what about you?
Well, when I started my first job at Bertelsmann, large media corporation, they were quite successful. You might all know the Bertelsmann Book Club, the branches.
I've never heard of it, so I don't know if they've heard of it.
Yeah, it's
so
a long time disrupted right now. But actually, it was a time when iTunes and Amazon disrupted the whole field. And I observed that the organization is not ready for change. And I think this is one of the hardest things for organizations and also for our societies to face, that we're not ready for change. So I think ready to be transformative, ready to transform is one of the key elements.
So how do you know someone's ready to transform? Because we're talking here about this, I call it a soft transformation. Because we heard yesterday and again about the vision for this place. So many of those elements are there. At the same time, we still need some transformation. So how do you recognize transformation potential? When is a place ready?
Well, I think maybe the question is rather, is the organization set up in a way that is agile enough, flexible enough? Are the people ready? Is the mindset ready? Do you have the right resources to change, right? The readiness comes within, I would say.
So I think it's really important because if we're thinking from the backcasting standpoint, maybe in order for the transformation to occur, one has to set things up, get things ready for a transformation. That's what I'm hearing from you. So as we're thinking about the backcast, maybe that's some of the steps which one needs to prepare.
Well, maybe there's more. Maybe we can, we heard from Verena yesterday how nature is doing it, right? So maybe we can learn how to transform our societies from experience in organizations, in nature, in organisms, right? So this is, this is something I would love to explore more.
Yeah, great. Now, Christin, you've worked on trying to help organizations, a couple of, like with Transformation with your fund, you've been actively trying to make, you call it OPC, other people's, OPM, other people's money, other people's capital, right? So in order for transformation to occur, there's there are many ways it can happen, but very often we need a capital. So tell us a little bit about that role of capital in making transformation happen from your standpoint.
Basically, all the young entrepreneurs or older entrepreneurs, basically applying, for example, at Christin, ultimately they want capital, right? They basically come to you because they want capital, and you have to assess them. So and that's the same when you do a fundraise, right? Whether you have a little startup, and all of these funds are also ultimately all entrepreneurs. Sorry, that was probably too loud.
Didn't like your idea there, dude. Sorry.
Bitter reality, I guess. True. But ultimately, okay, the idea is relatively simple. When you're an entrepreneur and you want to build up your idea, whether you're raising a fund, we are basically all in this idea that we need to raise capital ultimately because we want to grow something. Now we can discuss whether capital ultimately is the best thing, but ultimately that's the game. And I think my recommendation to this is when you want that, first of all, and Christine was saying it, you need, first of all, if you approach people, you need referrals, so you need some way of connection and community already. So if it's better if you know someone from Christine's team already, and you're not a complete unknown, okay? So that's number one. The second is, you, I think, need to be prepared, right? Ultimately, you need to be prepared so you know what you're talking about, and you need to bring this across, and that is because we all have now attention spans, you know, with our phones of seconds. It needs to be very elevated.
Okay, Christian, what are you...
It needs to be very fast, sorry. I'm pretty sure. That's one occasion. And the last one is you need to live with rejections. And sorry, that's also a bitter reality. Because typically you need to approach, sorry to say, 300 to 200 Christines, that one Christine is saying yes. Actually, even more. and that's the bitter truth about it.
So let's talk about that clarity for a moment, because I'm kind of curious about that, because for all three of you, you have, because I'm thinking also for our backcast, what does clarity mean? Right? What is clarity? And so what are... tell us something about that. I'm actually quite curious. What do you mean by that?
What means clarity?
Yeah, what's clarity?
Be able to explain what you're doing. Why is that exciting relatively fast? So why is that exciting about the business model? Why is it exciting for whatever you're doing? And lastly, what do you need in order to grow? Very few people are not able to basically do this in a very structured, simple way. What do you do? So she wants to know, what is the startup, what is the entrepreneur ultimately doing? The second is, why is that exciting? So she needs to know what is different about the team, what is different about the business model, what is different about the way they approach it, what is their USP? So that needs to be in the deck, in the presentation, in the excitement. And lastly, what do you need from me, from her, from us, in order to grow? So that's ultimately the three things. That's, to me, clarity. And bringing this across fast and clear is clarity.
Christian, you were sort of agreeing,
yes, I
and
agree,
not entirely
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes, and you know also which problem do you solve, which impact do you create. Of course, for us as an impact VC, it is also extremely important that we get this message very, very clearly. But I would like to add to one point that Christian just mentioned, you know, the fundraising. Basically, you know, it's the same, like it's kind of a circle, or you need to see it from a holistic perspective. So the startups need to approach many investors. Yeah, they need to be really resilient to get to that funding. The same is true for us. We are an impact VC fund. We also need to you know, get to our funding, to get our operations going. In particular,
she's
for
an
Christian,
entrepreneur as well.
in particular, Christian and myself. So we are in fundraising. We often share thoughts about that. That's, I mean, in the end, you know, it's a numbers game. You need to have many conversations. You need to be crazily resilient to all the no's that you're getting. Yeah, also for us, this is tough. But, I mean, it's a reality. But also, you know, there are also very positive conversations. And, so, I mean, in the end, it's the same for everyone, you know, in the ecosystem.
I think it's both really good points, and I'll come to you in just a second, Felix. But I think, again, I come back to what we're going to be doing over the next 24 hours. How do we create the clarity in the backcast? So we keep coming back to that, this clarity, you said the impact, clarity of message, clarity of the need, clarity, you know, so how to make something real as we go back in these back steps. So, Felix, for you, when we're thinking about clarity in the transformation, you could talk a lot about transformation.
I have to say, whenever I found myself in situations like asking board members for money, for budgets, or as an entrepreneur co-founder asking investors for money, there was not too much clarity about everything in all aspects of our journey, right? So...
Interesting boards.
No, I mean, but they invested anyhow. They invested...
But why?
Most of the time, they invested in people, right?
Yep.
People who had clarity about the resources, had clarity about a broad idea of the goal, and who wanted to make an impact, right?
So
it was not too clear about everything. So there is a little risk. There is a little entrepreneurial spirit left.
So I'm going to add a point there. It's like trust. They trusted you, or they trusted somebody, because this is what you're building with all those dialogues. You're building trust. You did mention the clear words, so they had a clear idea, et cetera, et cetera. But there's that other component, which is you trust this person or this group is going to achieve something.
And maybe I can add to that what you're saying, dear Felix. I think that integrity, that you need to feel that commitment, that passion in the founders, that resilience. Also, you definitely want to see that, and it's I think also an element that's massively undervalued in the whole evaluation. But still, we need clarity. So it's a combination from my perspective.
So I'd like to ask you a question about sort of. Was there some time, a solution you believed in, a project you believed in, and it just didn't quite work? Right? So you might have invested in something, you might have found something. It was just like, oh man, this isn't working. I know this is the right thing, but something's not clicking. And what can we learn from that when we're, again, thinking about our backcasting, the steps so we want to be thinking about moving forward? Can you share one? Ooh, I didn't tell you I was going to ask that question, did I?
You didn't tell us anything.
This is true, actually. So, yeah. But I trusted you.
We were yesterday talking about the bananas. That was great. That was fun. Shall I start? I mean, ultimately, every day is about something doesn't work. Basically, when we were first starting with an African fund, forestry, agriculture, many people ask you about Africa, and I heard there was an entrepreneur also from Africa about risks. Everyone who's speaking about Africa has in the first brain, and that's typical, risk. That's the very, very first thing. If I would talk to any one of you bilaterally, trilaterally, they would ask, oh, Africa, risk. That's a matter of fact in every conversation. And obviously you build, so to say, your logic against those risks, and you build certain if you want, I call it now layers of defense, but it's layers of explaining it, okay? And I think this is what you, with every conversation that you do, and as I said, the numbers were probably right. I'm sure that's the same with you. So the conversion rate of a positive to a no is 200 to 300 no's on one yes. And that means you have basically 199 chances of improving that. And this is, my wife is a doctor. Okay. Let's put it like this. A doctor you go to, and you typically go to a doctor and say, out of 200 cases, I want 199 to be exactly healthy after this again. If she had 199 failures, that would be a problem, right? Then we would probably not go to this doctor anymore, to that hospital, and so on. And for our job, and also for all of the entrepreneurs out there, it's exactly the other way around. And this is what you basically have to work on. I
hear that. I think for us, for the backcasting now, we haven't talked about this before, it's like some of the risks as we're backcasting, trying to think of some contextual risks to mitigate as we're doing the backcasts and think about that. I think it's a really good point. Christin, what about you?
I have a couple of things that come to my mind. I think you learn a lot, from things that are just not easy. So, for example, I give you like a personal example, but also an example where we invested in. So when we were planning to pull off to launch our first fund, the feedback from so many was, this is going to be a walk through the desert. Don't do this. This will just be so tough. We did it anyway, So also that's my advice. Don't listen too much to what the others say, honestly, and just go for it. Mm-hmm. And never accept a no. Yeah, after the last no comes a yes. That's not from me. That's actually from Al Gore. But we have it outside on one of those walls. Sometimes we need to maybe find like a worm, an organic way on the side, and you think, oh, that side track is actually quite interesting. So maybe we have to adapt the strategy a little bit. But I give you an example where we invested, and why it did not really work out. It's actually an ETH spin-off. We loved the company, or it was actually very young company in the vertical farming space. We loved the founders. We loved the whole idea. We invested in that company, amongst only private investors. So our fund was basically the only institutional investor, if you would say so. And then Corona kicked in, and they were in the middle of setting up that farm close to the Zurich airport, and then they had massive financial problems because everything was delayed and they got in delay with their delivery to Co-op for almost a year, which brought them into serious financial trouble. In the end, basically, they sold off their farm to another vertical farm. But sometimes also external factors kick in that you just really can't factor in the original due diligence. Yeah. But that's also part of the VC game. Yeah.
Just got to stand up and do it again. I think that's what you're both all saying. Stand up and do it again. Stand up and do it again.
Exactly. Failure is crucial to learning. When I worked at Bertelsmann, I was in a team responsible for new business development for a publishing company called Gruner & Jahr. They do magazines, special interest magazines. And they had to face the challenge of the new digital market. And I thought they were so lazy. I talked about that before. Mm-hmm. And they were not ready for change. So I went into a startup. I got this offer. We have a nice technology. We can do something out of it. And it turns out that the original idea, scanning newspapers for large corporates, find out whenever the CEO had said something that might have a negative impact on the company. That was the original technology about speech-to-text analytics, etc. Didn't quite work out. There's no business model behind it. Nobody wanted it. So we thought about something new, and we built up a new recommender approach for publishing companies. And it was incredibly successful, so that my former employer bought the company. You see, so we had Red Alpine VC in place. We had a big team of like 20, 25 developers. We all had to pay. There was so much going on. If we weren't ready to change, if VCs didn't trust us, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And that's why I said failure is normal. Yeah. Failure is okay. Yeah. It's crucial to learning. It's crucial for success, right?
I hear you. So I'd like to ask you one last question before it's your turn to think a little bit about questions you'd like to ask them. I'd like you to step into, say, the future. Step into 2050. I'm saying 2050, not 2040. 2050, looking back at 2040, because you're living to 110, so you'll still be a teenager then, and we'll be all. So I want you to step in and say, look back at 2040, and what things do you think we could think about being in place for a village, a valley like Le Punt, Shamwesh, Engadine Valley? From your standpoint, I would wish that there was this. I would hope there was this. I would love to see this. What does that look like? Can you step there for me for a moment? I know you can roll your eyes at it. It's not an easy one, but it's a...
That was also not discussed before.
No, it was not discussed before, but this is a test to see, okay.
Not at all.
Christian.
Maybe, anyway, I made so many friends with my comment on the airport yesterday. It came to my mind very spontaneously. And this morning on the bus, I live in a village next door, I read actually that on this weekend, St. Moritz is having an Abstimmung about like funding the airport again to expand the airport in Samedan. And I was thinking, okay, so maybe going back to your question, Chris. I mean, when I just think about that, I mean, imagine what you could do building regenerative farms on that plot of the airport, like transforming that whole valley, basically, and also giving those extremely, let's say, also of course the local community something at hand, but also giving something, like thoughtful to these crazily rich people who come to St. Moritz to say, yeah, that's actually quite something useful, and maybe we take actually our car from Milano. Maybe even we take the train. Maybe that could not be so bad.
But we don't take Deutsche Bahn. We're going to have to... Maybe by then we will. By then Deutsche Bahn's going to be awesome. It'll be even better than Trenitalia.
So that could be a thought, to transform the whole valley.
Okay, that's one. Felix, what about you? To step out there and think back. Also from an investment ecosystem, from an entrepreneurship, from a transformation. What do you think?
I like the idea of regenerative business models,
Okay.
right? I can't really say what it possibly could be, but starting from the resources that are here, from the interest in the region, from the transformation in nature we see. We heard a lot about that yesterday. I think somewhere there must be a vision, a solution.
Perfect. Thank you. Christian, you got one? You want time to wait?
I got the longest time, right?
You got the longest time, bud.
So not too far from here in Sils Maria was written by Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, Zarathustra. Who has read it? So that's Maria Sils, more or less the same valley, all the valley of the Engadina. And one famous sentence in Zarathustra is, die ewige Wiederkehr des Ewiggleichen. The same repetition over and over again, basically. Right? And I think ultimately, one important thing is to keep what is here, bring new models here, and I think honestly, in particular in La Punt, there is already a very nice model with InHub. So I think ultimately we should stay humble, and that's also one of the core ideas, work for our freedom. Because that's also one of the points, and sorry, I keep it philosophical. You have more hands-on advice, I keep it more philosophical, because ultimately our being is also about humility and being happy with what we have.
Yeah, great. That's a great, thank you for that. And this is a great point to pause and say for you, 5 minutes, discuss amongst yourselves and ask us if you have some great stumper questions, for these three individuals on stage. You've done the drill now a couple of times, you know what it is. So the 5 minutes starts now. Who has... Oh man, I didn't even ask the question and the hands are up. All right, Mary Claire. Mary Claire, then we'll go to Rick, and then we'll go to Reto. How's that? Mary Claire, Rick, Reto, then we'll come over here to Darko.
Samuel and I have a question. So Samuel?
So we were wondering, because you were saying...
I was trying to locate you, sorry.
You were saying that you want to invest in companies that drive systemic transformation, and we were wondering that for us it seems like, okay, if an enterprise still focuses on profit and growth because they have to, because they need returns, no, for the investors. If you can see that as systemic transformation, or if it would need actually an enterprise that prioritizes impact and let's say also maybe participation.
Okay, good question.
Before, like prioritizes it before, let's say, economic viability or profits, let's say. Economic viability, I'm guessing, is like a basic, no?
Great question, go.
And then maybe also the question of ownership, like models like cooperatives, could they be supported or like invested by you?
Go for it.
So first of all, if you ask the question to a VC, I'm not a VC, but I know a little bit, I would say.
Well, if you're going to let the VC answer for the VC.
No, but I give now the VC answer, and she can kick me back, okay? That was more the idea, if that's okay.
We know each other well.
Yes, I know you're old friends.
Ultimately, a VC is about performance. That's the sad story. So I've been 5 years in a company, and they want ultimately performance. Yes, there's many VCs, impact VCs, who also have the focus of how do we measure the impact, how do we basically report that, and how do we make basically sure that these companies survive. Yes, that is, so to say, a version of a traditional VC, but ultimately a traditional VC is about profits. Now, I've been recently engaged in a model, and I also had a conversation with Felix about it. It's called vierte Orte, fourth places or locations.
Say it again, it's called what?
Fourth locations.
Fourth location.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, there was a wealthy individual buying churches in different cities and was basically reusing them, repurposing them, right? Taking, so to say, the saints, the glorification aspect out of it, and basically making new locations. That's in smaller cities, basically a location, and it's not, let's say, like this, extremely interesting from a return perspective, but it's extremely high on the social aspect, okay? And I believe that basically we're going away, but this is a long process, that's how I would see it, that we're going away from purely profit-driven into many other aspects. And I think we had this question also with Felix on the very first day with those 3 young gentlemen. I don't know where they are currently. Thank you. That I think, so to say, in the mix of how you assess something becomes much more than only money. That would be my answer.
Christin.
Very good point, Christian. I mean, going back to your question, from an impact VC perspective, positive impact creation and also the achievement of strong financial returns go hand in hand. They're complementary. There is no trade-off, at least what we are doing. So, as I said, so we want to see in the first place, is the business model really transformative? Is the impact ingrained in the core DNA of the company? But does the company also have a strong growth market? Yeah, and with growth we mean always like regenerative growth. Yeah, ideally, does the solution change whatever? Is it intended to change behavior amongst the consumers? I can give you an example if you want. But so this goes hand in hand from the perspective of an impact VC.
Give us an example. Make it real.
Yeah. So, for example, we have invested, and that's one of our very good investments. So, in a German-based company, they they're called Vital. They have a technical system for they're basically reusable dishes, basically for takeaway food. They also do events, very large events. They recently expanded to America. They did the German football. What is the Europa Cup last year? They were in Paris at the Olympics. So they actually have very transformative business model because they really want to drive the systemic shift towards a circular economy. They want to really help consumers to get into reusables and get away from single-use plastics. Mm-hmm. We believe it's a very, very interesting company that grows very quickly. Okay.
Felix, you want to add to that? And I'll go to the next question then.
Yeah, just quickly, maybe I can kick back to you. So there is studies, for example, Florian Lütke-Freund from ESCP had a nice representative study that there is positive impact on business model transformation if you work regenerative, if you integrate sustainable moments in your transformation process. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's only profit. It could also be cost reduction. There's lots of things paying to what VCs want in the end, right?
Okay, we're not going to get into a VC debate up here because we also have some other folks in the room who are great at this. So I think we're going to go ahead and then. So I think Rick was the next. Philip will come back to you after we do Darko. Philip, and who was over here? Reto.
Right. Really interesting discussion. So I'm thinking as you're talking that profit, return on investment, impact, the definition of success all happens within the context of an infrastructure, policy, regulatory, financial frameworks that even make having a business possible. And I'm wondering, and that varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I'm wondering if there are factors that would make what you're trying to do easier or more successful that we should consider at that level?
Great question. Here in Le Punt, here in Switzerland, are there certain things that they should be thinking about? Sure, go. Anyone who can answer that question. I can't answer it.
I would start with the resources we have. If you look at Le Punt, we have this great new collaborative hub made for learning, for co-working, inviting people. We have the situation here. I mean, in front of your eyes, you can learn from climate change, or you can learn about climate change. I would start there and use this, maybe also for tourism, right? Mm-hmm. People want to come here. I mean, they can go skiing to St. Moritz or buy expensive food or drinks, but they can come here and learn and collaborate. Mm-hmm. Exchange with people from different backgrounds.
So it's really
I think that's really interesting.
That's a good point.
It's really that could be a magnet.
It's a good point. I think Rick was talking more about, you're talking about more to a federal, cantonal level. Is that what yeah, so like, Rick, so frameworks, legal frameworks. Felix, your point is a really, really good one to remember in the backcasting. With the in-hub, will be finished in 2029. It's on our way to 2040. That can be part of an ecosystem, which we want to be thinking about for the changing, as we backcast. So that's actually a really good point. But are there some things that we can be thinking about? Because you get it.
I mean, that's not highly innovative, but still, of course, incentives, right, would always be very helpful. Also, for example, for the tourism industry, if those hotels, whatever, smaller places get incentivized by the local government, if they pull off certain sustainable initiatives, I think that would drive. Yeah,
okay, so
incentives.
So incentives are an interesting one. There are many incentive mechanisms here. There are local fund mechanisms, or national fund mechanisms. There's cantonal funding opportunities. There is a list. Switzerland is frankly an easy place to do a startup. It really is. It's a terrible place to do the next round of funding, but it's a great place to start up. This is just fact, right? So, that's kind of easy.
And the Rätische Eisenbahn is quite on time.
Pardon?
The Rätische Eisenbahn, compared to the German railways, is quite on time.
Yeah, the little red trains are here very punctually. All the red trains are, and the white ones. So Reto is over here.
Maybe
then we got to come, then we go here. Oh, this could go on for 3 hours. This is cool. Okay. Reto.
Thanks for the discussions. I mean, basically, there's always one point in all these discussions that I'm kind of frustrated by, and I know it's the reality currently, but it's a wish for certainly 2040, is that if you have 199 no's, we all know how much effort and how much time and how much brain power that could be used for something much more efficient. It's on the investor level, it's on the entrepreneur level. What are alternatives? Is there a chance maybe for this valley to do something much more community collaborative based, much more democratic, much more alternatives to this VC model that works super well for certain very few things, but not for most of the rest? And so I don't know have the answers at all, but I think it's something we definitely need to find alternatives or.
Great question, Rachel. Great comment. So I see vigorous yeses.
Maybe Ray, very quickly to your point. I don't think that the VC funding model is the solution here for the Valley. Don't get me wrong. So that, but I absolutely believe that would also be one of my points that I would love to convey. I think this whole shift also needs to come from bottom up, not top down. So bottom up, involving the communities. For me, a shift towards a regenerative economy is impossible without also simultaneously also creating a regenerative society, basically. This morning I had a coffee with 3 locals just around the corner at the sports shop here, and they were saying, what are you doing in those tents? And I tried to explain it. Yeah, really, what for weird things.
Magic.
And I told them, this, I think, I don't know what they did. They spoke Romansh, but they could speak, so we spoke like, a little bit as good as we could together. But I tried to explain it in very, very simple words, not like on a highly sophisticated level. And I said, oh, very cool, we want to come. I said, come. I think we need to involve them much more in this.
They've been invited many times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've done that. Yeah. Next question. So you look like you're on the edge of your chair for this one.
Maybe I can. So ultimately, I think basically funding will go more and more to the crowd, to be honest. When you now have very good ideas and they're hard to fund in the beginning, sorry, the VC model will stay because it has for certain things definitely a very clear say. And yes, it has nothing to do with this valley, or less or so. But I think ultimately you need to involve people and probably much more crowd solutions. And when you read all of these books, probably in 2050, this will be much more the answer. That's what our 2040 will much more the answer. Maybe very quickly, because there was 2 questions and I want to quickly raise, I think ultimately you see very often people, and in particular people who don't like to basically jump the first time into the cold water, right? Let's face it, we have people who are the first jumpers and we have people who are the later jumpers and the very late jumpers. And I think, and the never jumpers, I don't know who was it, 100%. Yeah? And that's exactly this. So I think we need to focus on where do we really have an angle. And I think ultimately for those later people, they need sometimes a kick in the butt. And now I'm trying to link this also to Verena yesterday and to Marco. I don't know if he's here. But for example, there was in this valley a big storm called Helmut, apparently. I don't know who knows about this, but that changed everything here. Helmut, basically, very German name, basically killed here everything because he was basically throwing entire forests away. And I think sometimes, in order to get moving, you need this damn and kick in the butt. Sorry, I hope this is not quoted, but
no, it's all recorded, man. It's okay. We got you. We can add other words to that. I think, but I wanted to, Christin, Christin, you got a really good point, which is how to engage a community. Many of us probably have also been with community engagement, and we've been up here 3 years, and every individual has received emails, letters, notes from the Gemeinde. We have students here. It's fascinating to me how much you have to communicate and you still don't know and still want more. And I think this is for all of us when we're thinking about transformation, and also when we're thinking about our backcasting, is thinking, how do we communicate? Who do we communicate with? And we talked about yesterday the channels, right? And the channels of communication. You can't do, it seems like you can never do enough to get communicating to everybody. And this is always the case. And I think this is it's so beautiful to so many individuals who are from the Valley who are here today. Because the first year we didn't have that connection, and now we do. And I think that's really extremely important. I just want to say that, and I acknowledge that very much so. We have time for like 2, maybe 3 more questions. We're here on the front row, and then we're going to go Greta, and then Juliette. Sorry for any. Okay. Go.
So speaking about transformation, we were wondering of how your businesses specifically transform to allow more diverse group to participate in the capital market. Natasha gave a wonderful online speech about the future female economy. The VC funds that go into females is ridiculously low. We speak about 3%. How do we change that we don't see the African continent as a risk, but as a potential? So
Yeah.
do you also think about adapting how you measure return on investment?
Go ahead, Christin.
So from our perspective, we are like a female-founded company ourselves, and I know, how hard it is to get something pulled off. But so, for example, as I mentioned before, so we are like holistic investor, conscious investor. Yeah. So we also invest with a gender lens and a biodiversity lens. You cannot see things in isolation. So if I go back to, for example, Vital, the company that I gave you from Germany. So those were 3 white male founders at the beginning when we invested in 2021. And we told them we always sign a side letter with each share purchase agreement when we buy into that company for to cement basically our long-term impact creation. And so we told them, actually, we want to see your boards, your management team much more gender balanced going forward. So they also now have a female MD in their management team, so we just believe, diverse teams, they just work much better.
And you actively advocate. This is a part of your work with your investee. Is to actively say either you're on board with this.
It's an active process, yes.
You're on board with this, or we're not with you. Right? And this is a really important thing. Is they do actively discriminate, as one has been discriminated against, and then discriminate in a very positive way. So I'd like to take the next question from Greta. Oh, sorry. Sorry, excuse me. Julie.
No,
and then Juliet.
So we've been wondering, that if you want to support regenerative projects, you have to support them in a social way, in an environmental way, and in an economical way. Do you have some measuring tools or some evaluation tools where you can actually make sure that these investments are not just great stories, but always also like objective measurement things? You understand?
Ways to make it real. Okay. Tight answer. Ways to make it real.
So that's my topic, but that could take a bit longer. No, I try to keep it very short. We call it, that's the impact value creation package that we bring to the table as an impact VC, and that goes far beyond simple impact measurement and reporting. So for example, we help our companies where we invest in to drive real systemic change on a systems level post-investment. So we do a systems mapping, which, by the way, we pay, not the company. So we pay it out of our own money. What is the intention of such a systems map? It's really to identify leverage factors amongst the large stakeholder group that, for example, the portfolio company might have not even thought of, and to accelerate the systemic shift towards a regenerative economy. On the other hand, for example, John Fullerton, he is a pro on the whole regeneration topic, co-authored a chapter in my book on conscious investing, and we also apply his methodology in screening companies for regeneration before we invest. So it's a whole package that we apply even during due diligence, but then in particular post-investment during the time when we collaborate. Sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you. No, so the things are there. Christian, a very short comment.
Very quickly, because I'm looking more at the fund level. I think it's extremely important that the guys who manage a fund, whatever they're doing, be it real assets, be it whatever they're doing, VCs, and I know Christian is doing this as well, that they link basically to the environmental, social, and governance goals, basically their outcome and their performance. So the performance of the team is typically linked to some
other
potential
metrics
of upside, and that needs to be linked. So only if this is both in place, basically they can benefit or profit from that.
Maybe can I quickly add? Sorry, but this is very, very important what Christian just mentioned, because this is very painful, because if this does not work out, then we are basically fucked as a fund manager, because then we do not get the performance fee, which is our most important fee. But that's also a very strong link that we believe, in the real change, because our fee depends also on the positive impact creation of those companies. We tie our fee 100% to that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Really, really wonderful. Thank you for that. Juliet, last question.
Thank you very much. Mine is to you, Christian, because you're the one who talked about Africa. How do we de-risk the continent? Given our politics and everything that's happening, the corruption and everything, no one wants to invest in us. And we are the youngest population in the world, and we continue to grow. So we are thinking 2040, how do we ensure that we invest in the brilliant minds on the continent to actually be able to serve the rest of the world? But then also to the other speakers on the panel, many young Africans, we have brilliant ideas, but our startups die at their third birthday or their second birthday. And this is because when we get the money, we are excited. Oh, finally someone believes in my idea. So the first thing is I want an iPhone. I want a Porsche car. So financial management is something I don't have great ideas about. I don't even know how to write my next concept note that will get the next person to actually invest in me. How do we, even when we invest in these young people, ensure that we are giving them the knowledge and retooling them to make sure that their ideas don't die just on their second birthday?
Thank
so that's
you, Julia.
many
Great
questions.
question.
I think we could stay here till tonight, probably, to answer this, and I would gladly do so. So I try very quickly the risk, okay? The risk I heard, basically how you make sure that founders are doing something. Maybe I'm going to give that to you, or I don't know, to both of you. And what was the third part of the question, sorry?
The education for youth and how to ensure that they're empowered and supported and not just buying Porsche cars.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's basically to make sure that the flowers, those Porsche cars seems to be a topic, right? The first one is about the risks. So to make it relatively simple, our investors have signed in their agreements basically that we only invest the money in Africa if we have a so-called political risk insurance. Political risk insurance makes sure that, for example, Italy has the same risk as, for example, some country in Africa where many of you probably might not have been, Ethiopia. You pay for these risks, but you have to do very, very tough diligent tests, so-called Asia studies, environmental social impact assessments, and they're painful, and quite honestly, but they make sure basically in case you lose your money because of expropriation, because of political violence, of war, social unrest, many of these aspects, that you get up to 90, even up to 100% of the investor's money back. So that's the first thing, and I think that's what we need in order to make sure that we compare risks and chances more or less on the same level. So that's extremely important, and I think there are many of such concepts, but many don't use it. That's number one. Second question, education is extremely important, and honestly, I think I just heard in this year that, for example, a country like India is implementing universities and vocational trainings every day, one university. Every day, one university. That's nearly 300. So that's 360 something ETHs every day. India. Sorry, Africa is not there. And I think that is ultimately yet, yeah. And I think that is ultimately something that we need to do much more, and then have, of course, practical sharings of entrepreneurs telling what went wrong. So I think the best VCs that I have seen is basically that they don't say, I tell you how the world looks like. Not at all, because is she omniscient? Maybe. But am I omniscient? Definitely not. If he omniscient? Definitely not. Even Chris not. But the idea is the VC sees, let's say, 30 cases, and he sees, for example, a founder struggling, for example, with that Porsche question, and sees him struggling, and basically, why don't I connect him to that founder? Independent of whether it's a female or a male, by the way. But let him learn from them, because they have been in all of these processes, in all of these struggling moments. And I think that's key, learning from the guy, the girl, whoever, who is exactly in this struggle currently, and how did you resolve it? I think that's good. And then it's also humility of the VC not to say, I know how it works, because, sorry, maybe they don't.
Anything to add? Don't have to? Okay. Last question.
risk with some opportunities. The second thing is, if we want to turn Africa an investment-grade continent, nobody's going to invest because the risks you're paying for insurance is so high that at the end of the day, you won't do it. Most of the time, it is. So at the end, I think it doesn't really make sense to look at that point. It's opportunity, you're going to risk, and you have to accept those risks if you want to invest in them. Otherwise, Africa will remain where it is. I don't agree.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Christian. I'll let the two of you discuss this at the coffee machine. If anyone else would like to go with this one, I want to focus on, come back to Le Punt, if we can. This is where we want to. And Julia, I respect and wholly embrace your questions. A very good one, a very important one. And let's take that for a little, we can have a genus loci dialogue on this one. I mean, I'm quite serious because it's a very, very, very
Happy to
real.
do it.
It's a very real challenge, a very real opportunity, and if we collectively as a human species don't get this right, we're all, as you said, kind of effed. So I think this is really crucial. The biggest continent, the biggest opportunity. We are now at a point where I get to say thank you to this incredibly gifted and passionate panel. I want to thank all three of you. Let's give them a nice round of applause.